The very latest on the federal election now. We are 1 week away from this vote. In fact, already 2 million plus Canadians have cast their ballots in advance polls, which are still open right now for another couple of hours. Let's bring in CTV's Michel Boyer, who is standing by in Ottawa. And Michel, the big talk today is sort of chatter around coalitions and possible minority government scenarios and working coalitions. So many different possible configurations here with so many players on the ice, so to speak. What's going on?
Well, now they're saying no. We are not working towards a coalition. It sounds like all the leaders obviously want to lead government here. So they are dialing back a little bit of the rhetoric, the talk about any possibility of a coalition government. And let's look at the political spectrum here, because I think this is important. If you look at the spectrum from left to right, left being liberal, right being conservative, the left is a very busy place. There's the Liberals, there's the NDP, the Greens, the Bloc in Quebec. And right now, and it all started over the weekend, talk about a possible coalition. And now it's looking, based on these numbers, is that it is looking like there is a strong possibility of a minority government. The Liberals would have a lot more, let's say, allies to work with. We're talking about the Greens and the NDP and the Bloc as well, much more so than the Conservatives. And you can see that the Conservatives, well, they really came out swinging today because they pretty much put the Liberals, the NDP, and the Greens all in the same basket and said, hey, listen, you elect the Liberals, it's going to cost Canada a lot of money. And Andrew Scheer may have a point, because if we're looking at a Liberal minority government, Todd, the Greens and the NDP, they want things like pharmacare, universal health care, things along those lines. And in order, for the Liberals not to fall, they may need to concede and go with some of those promises. It's something that is a very real possibility.
There's also the idea, Michel, of strategic voting, and it's an open question how many people, actually do that, enter the ballot box and sort of look at which way the winds are blowing and decide to vote for one party based on what it may or may not do to another party they don't want to be elected, and we'll see how that plays out. But this notion, with 2 million plus Canadians that have already cast their ballots, certainly Friday, Saturday, plus the voting that was going on campuses, those people have already decided. So that's another kind of interesting factor in all of this, that, that happened before we were talking about coalitions.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what the reality is that there had been a lot of, well, I guess you could say debate, I would say more mudslinging in this election campaign leading up until this point. The platforms more or less out. The costing, more or less out. Still a lot of questions over a lot of the promises, but people have a general sense of who the leaders are, what they represent, what the parties represent, what change they want to happen. And now it's really the fact that there have been so many people who have showed up to these advanced polling stations really does, I think, send a message to the parties that their clock is ticking, because that means that there are fewer and fewer voters that they have to convince.
All right. I also want to ask you, if I can, about this security incident that happened over the weekend, Michel, at this Liberal rally in Mississauga. So the Prime Minister, or Liberal leader Justin Trudeau, is there, and he gets word that there is what's being called a unspecified threat. This is interesting, too, and sort of disturbing as well when you think about this. We know that Justin Trudeau is well known for wading into crowds. He attends parades. He was at that major climate rally in Montreal. It's almost impossible, I would think, for the RCMP and his security detail to be aware of everyone, especially when there are these public events where you've got hundreds, or in the case of the event in Mississauga, thousands of people.
Yeah, I know people who are on his security detail, and it is very, very nerve-wracking, especially when you're dealing with this kind of threat. It is extremely rare for a prime minister or a Liberal leader, but we'll use the word prime minister in this case, to have to wear a bulletproof vest. Justin Trudeau is still being protected by what is called the PMPD, the Prime Minister's Protective Detail, a branch, I guess you could say, of the RCMP. They follow the Prime Minister, the family, wherever they go. And the other leaders have RCMP officers who are trained in bodyguarding. So it's a different ball game. the fact that Trudeau had to wear a bulletproof vest was very serious. They would not have been able, I'm told by a number of sources, they would not have been able to have the event at all had he not worn a bulletproof vest. And, you know, those images of the officers, the detail around him, much more dramatic than we have ever seen. That is indicative. It's indicative because the threat that they received was likely very credible. All leaders receive a number of threats, but they have to go through an assessment process, figure out if it's somebody who's sad and angry in their basement sending nasty messages on, you know, Twitter, Facebook, whatever message boards, or if there's a real chance that something could materialize. And in this case, they took no chance at all. I'm told, again, they would have had to have canceled the event had he not worn that bulletproof vest. Sophie Grégoire Trudeau was supposed to be on that stage with him. She was absent, Todd.
Yeah, and well, you mentioned something about folks in the basement. I mean, you know, with the job that you do at the Ottawa Bureau, well, you know, that on Twitter, you know, there is a lot of nasty stuff said about Justin Trudeau.
There really is.
A lot of very, you know, vicious hashtags that are out there about him. You know, it's one thing to put something out there on Twitter, but, you know, there's always this worry nowadays. It's just the reality right around the world, whether that in the sort of the digital world sort of moves over into the real world, Michel.
Oh, absolutely. It is a very real possibility. It's a very real threat. And it's something that leaders and their families and politicians have to deal with. Catherine McKenna has been the subject of a number of threats as well. I'm hearing that she even has her own detail because it's just so risky, and the spectrum and the political world is just so highly charged right now. The left attacked the right attacked the left, and over everything, over, you know, every little word. So, you know, especially on Twitter, it is nasty out there, but especially for those people who are running, you know, when you're not used to getting threatened, I know some people who are living it for the first time, and it's unsettling.
Yeah, no doubt. Michel Boyer in Ottawa with the very latest. Good to have you on, Michel. We'll talk soon.
You bet. Thanks.